Well, good afternoon, everybody. All 145 of you, welcome. This is the Invest in New York Child Care Desert RFA overview. We are going to be going through the newly released request for applications. But before we do that, I want to do a little bit of housekeeping about how today is going to go. All phone lines are currently muted. It is a big group, and we want to get through all of the content. So all phone lines are currently muted. So you can, if you have questions, send them through the Q&A box that's in this webinar, or you can email the email address on screen, the investnychildcare@ocfs.ny.gov. We are taking all the questions compiled from our previous info session and this one received in that email box and just doing one big question and answer document so everybody has the same answers and questions. We will not be answering questions here in this session today because we want to make sure everybody has the same answer. This presentation is being recorded and it will be posted online, and it's also this same presentation has been translated into Spanish and is also already posted on our website. So this is obviously being offered in English only, but this presentation is previously has been recorded and is on our website, as well as the Spanish version and the Spanish PowerPoint deck. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So again, thank you for joining us today. This is our agenda going through a presentation of the request for applications and this funding opportunity. We will share the timeline and the different components of the grant about the approach and the funding, and as well as talking about the Child Care Desert map that is part of this project, and then what you will need to know going into being interested in applying. So again, we won't be answering questions on this webinar. You can send it in the Q&A box. You can send it to the email address, but please feel free to submit them. And again, check the website frequently because we will be updating it with the questions and answers document in English and Spanish. So let's get started. Thank you again for joining us, all 173 of you. We're rising quickly. We're very excited about this opportunity, and we're very excited about the response to these information sessions. We want to get out as much of this information as quickly as possible. So the timeline is very important and a little bit different than we have done in the past. So we did release the request for applications number 1 on January 28th. The application portal opens on April 11th. There is some time, there is some work that needs to happen in between that time, and we're going to go through what that means. But right now, we're walking through the grant and the grant requirements, and you can apply for the grant starting in April. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that means. But the application portal is only open from April 11 to May. It's a relatively short time period. So we want to do a lot of these information sessions and make sure everybody is aware of the requirements so that they have everything they need in advance of applying. We expect the portal to close on May. We will be announcing awards in June. And then payments will begin after licensure and a vendor review by OCFS. So we hope to move quickly after the portal closes and all the awards are announced. So what are child care deserts? So child care deserts are census tracts where there are 3 or more children under 5 for each available child care slot, or there's no child care in that census tract. And census tracts are small geographic areas that are created by the U.S. Census Bureau as a way to look at population density. So what we did is look at we and our partners at the Council on Children and Families is looking at the licensed and registered and permitted care in New York State, and also the census tracts or geographic area and how many what is the shortage of care around the state? How much are we short childcare around the state, and how does it differ around the state? So childcare deserts are where there is a lack of childcare, and it varies between a slight shortage or a drastic shortage where there's no childcare. There is a map that was posted, and we posted all that information online, and we're going to go into the map a little bit later, but this is the web address where the map is located. And we're going to walk you through the map, so don't worry. So how are we going to address childcare deserts? $100 million was identified in last year's budget to both build and expand childcare capacity in those areas of the state with the least capacity. So it is also looking at prioritizing those parts of the state with the most need or the least capacity. So the $100 million was split into two buckets, $70 million for brand new programs through this RFA or this request for application that we will be talking about today, and $30 million for future request for applications that has not yet been released. So today's webinar and the request for applications and grants that we're talking about today is just for new programs and just for $70 million. Just $70 million. This is using federal pandemic relief funding through the American Rescue Plan Act. It is intended to look at child care supply and also the acute shortage of infant toddler care, as well as the lack of child care outside of non-traditional hours. And we will be talking about those throughout the opportunity as important priorities statewide. So where are the child care deserts? The highlighted column here shows each region of the state and how many of their census tracts are identified as child care deserts. REDC is a Regional Economic Development Council region. There's 10 regions of the state as a way to split up the state. And so they are listed here in order of those regions with the highest percent of deserts, AKA those parts of the state which have the most shortage. So Southern Tier, North Country, Mohawk Valley, and Central all have over 70% of their region, just their small number of counties are child care deserts, over 70% of their region. But you'll notice in every part of the state, there are child care deserts and there is a shortage of care. Statewide, 61% of our state is child care deserts. So every part of this state can apply for this grant opportunity because there are child care deserts everywhere. All of this information is also found in the request for applications document and on our website. So I'm going to keep moving, but feel free to dive into it. So how did we, I'm going to go into the request for applications. I'm going to talk about the grant and walk through the grant and the approach that we have taken to roll this funding out and get it providers online as quickly as possible. Like I said, we are releasing the funding in two pots, $70 million for new providers, and that's what we're talking about today, and $30 million for existing licensed child care providers who can expand their slots under their existing license. So the $70 million is for brand new licensed, registered, or permitted Article 47 providers. So let's talk about the request for applications, RFAs, request for applications. Apologies for the acronyms. So in section 3.1, it does talk about eligibility, and we're getting a lot of questions about eligibility, so I just want to spend a minute here. So the following providers are eligible. People, interested parties, companies, nonprofits who are interested in opening a new child care site with a new OCFS or DOHMH permit number for an Article 47 center in New York City. They need to agree to the terms of the award, and they need to be either in the process of applying to receive a license or have received a license after January 28th. So if a provider was licensed in November 2021, they are not eligible for this award. If a provider is not going to open until 2024, that is too far in the future, they are not eligible for this award. I'll go through the specifics of the time frame in a minute. And also, if providers are applying for a different type of permit, they are not eligible for this award. So, speaking about providers not eligible, sorry, I could have clicked one forward. So the following providers are not eligible to apply. So existing programs with a license, registration, or permit, programs or providers that have held a license within the year preceding and are current license holders and are changing locations but not in fact expanding their capacity are not eligible to apply. We know that sometimes providers have to move locations, and so if there's a currently licensed provider that's licensed, say, for 50 kids, so a center needs to go to a different location for 50 kids, that provider is not eligible to apply, even though they need to go through a licensing process. If you have a home-based provider, a family daycare, and it's looking to expand to a group family daycare, so they used to take care of 8 kids and now they're going to take care of 16 kids, they are eligible to apply because they are expanding their programs. All programs and all providers need to meet requirements of licensure. So if you cannot meet the requirements of licensure, you're not eligible to apply. And then sites that receive 100% of their funding from public sources such as Head Start or publicly funded pre-K programs are not eligible to apply because 100% of their expenses are already covered. If a program or provider does have Head Start funding or pre-K for part of their program or is expecting to have Head Start or pre-K for part of their programming, but maybe they have wraparound before, after, or additional programming, then they would be eligible to apply because it's not 100%. All right. Apologies that I'm clicking too much here. Sorry. Okay. So how long can we, what is the duration of this opportunity? How long can the grant go? So the funds are available for up to 2 years from the date of licensure in quarterly payment periods not to exceed June 30th, 2024. So what does that mean? That's a lot of words. So because this is federal funding, it does need to be liquidated as of 2024. So we have a hard stop or a hard limit on when we can spend the funds. So if, say, you're in the process right now of going through licensure to become a licensed child care program, you apply for the award, you're awarded, and then you quickly finish your licensure and are able to, secure and get up and running as of July or August, you would have, of 2022, you would have almost 2 years of full funding. But if the licensure takes a little bit longer, which we know in some cases can happen, again, I will talk about timing, it would be a little bit less than 2 years. So we are saying this is up to 2 years up until June 30th, 2024. It will vary based on the awardee and when they're able to secure their licensure. So how does the money break down? For this, again, this is for the $70 million for new providers. That's the only grant we're talking about today. So 90% of the $70 million is going to be towards a base award for providers, and then there's an additional 10% available for bonuses for providers looking to provide care to infant and toddlers or for providing care during non-traditional hours. The funding has also been split between 60% downstate and 40% upstate. And this is kind of showing the breakout between the 60%, the base funding, which is the 90%. So this is $63 million of the base towards the base funding. It is split between daycare centers, which is the DCC, family daycare or group family daycare, which is FDC, GFDC down the center, and school age childcare, which is SACC. And then those are the regions across the state. Like I said, it's split 60-40 downstate, upstate, and the regions for downstate and upstate. So depending on what type of program you are and where you're applying from, that will determine the amount of availability of funding. You do not need to calculate any of this. When you go to apply for the award, it will be automatically calculated based on where your program is located and the capacity of kids you're going to serve. So this is a table for your reference, but you certainly do not need to track all of this down and look at the breakdown. But I did want to note that daycare centers are competing against daycare centers, home-based programs are competing against home-based programs, and school age are competing against school age. The bonus funding available for infant, toddler, and non-traditional hours are also allocated by region and by modality. So this is the remaining $7 million of the 70. So how much money are you going to get at a provider level? That's the real reason everyone's here. And welcome to the folks who joined later. I just want to revisit the housekeeping. All lines are muted for this webinar with over 200 folks online, which is great. So if you have a question, please feel free to put it into the Q&A for the presenters, and we will collect all of the questions, and we're going to be drafting answers, getting it translated into Spanish, and posting all of those questions and answers on our website. So please feel free to submit your questions and then check back soon for the Q&A document, and we'll also blast that out. The other thing I just wanted to note for folks on the line, we did present the same presentation last Monday, and so this presentation and the script and my voice for an hour, if you want to do that again, I don't know why you'd want to, as well as a Spanish version are all posted on our website. So if you forget to track something down or have a question, those all can be found on the OCFS website. Kathy or others, if you guys can post the link into the chat or in where the attendees can see it. I think it's not the chat because there's not a chat, right?
That's right. So what we'll actually do is email everyone that registered with a link to the recording.
That's right. Thanks. Okay. So how much funding is available for programs? That's the reason we're all here. So the funding is split into your program type. Center-based programs are calculated on a per slot basis. So for center-based programs, which are school-age childcare, daycare centers, and group daycare centers, which are Article 47 permitted programs, it is on a per slot basis on an annual basis. So up to the max award, and those numbers are seen here. For New York City and Long Island, it's $9,000 per slot, up to a cap of $500,000, and then for upstate, it is $7,000 up to a cap of $400,000. For school-age childcare, it's $3,300 up to $300,000, and then for rest of state, it's $2,500 up to $200,000. For home-based programs, since they are generally awarded the same capacity amounts, for family daycare, it's usually 8, and group family, it's usually 16. So home-based programs are going to be awarded on a per program basis instead of a per slot basis. So for family daycare, so the smaller programs, the award amounts are $18,000 per program, and then for New York City and Long Island and Westchester, and then all other for rest of state it's $14,000, and for group family daycare for New York City and Long Island it's $30,000, and then rest of state is $23,000. So it does depend on what part of the state you're operating in or expect to be operating in. So the bonuses, I did mention this before, the award calculation for bonuses, we really want to encourage providers offering infant toddler care. So we will be offering $3,000 per infant toddler slot. So it's a $3,000 per slot per year bonus. So that would be calculated, I'm just going to go back one slide. So you say you want to open a home-based program in Long Island, your award amount would be $18,000, but say you want to have the 2 infant toddler slots, so you could get $6,000 additional per year on top of the $18,000, if that makes sense. And so you would have your 2 licensed infant slots in your family daycare, 6 other kids in your care. And then for also offering $3,000 for providers who will be open during non-traditional hours. There is some fine print here when I say non-traditional hours. What does that mean? It's after 7 up until 6 a.m. as well as weekends and the following federal holidays. Just I wanted to make a note about New York City has a different definition of non-traditional hours for their permitted programs, which are considered night care. So you would need to conform to whatever your regulator's definition is. And there will be a critical mass of non-traditional hours needing to be open for non-traditional hours. So it's not like you're open one day for the year and then you would get that bonus, but it would need to be a critical threshold of, you know, you're open a substantial amount of additional hours for families. So how would the award be calculated? So they will be prorated based on the duration of the grant per provider. So what does that mean? If a provider is unable to get licensed until the end of the required time, they obviously would have a shorter time period that they would be receiving the grant. So if a person is, you know, just starting out the licensing process and there's issues with zoning or there's issues with other things, there is a criteria of 120 days from notice of award. So providers have 120 days from the time they are notified that they are getting this Child Care Desert grant to receive their license, unless there are extenuating circumstances, and that those circumstances need to be documented and submitted to OCFS and or New York City DOHMH. So that means the first bullet is if you are able to get licensed sooner, you would have a longer duration of your grant versus if you are at the end of that 120 days, it would be prorated to fit in that time period. So payments, actual payments may be impacted by not achieving the grant deliverables, and we're going to talk about what those are in a moment. So those initial amounts are not guaranteed grant amounts. Those are your initial amounts, and then you need to meet each of the grant deliverables each quarter. And then payments will begin after licensure and the pre-award requirements. So say, for example, if you start off offering non-traditional hours, but something happens and you're not able to continue offering non-traditional hours, you would no longer receive the non-traditional hour bonus once you no longer were offering those services. You could still receive the base award, but you obviously wouldn't receive the bonus because you weren't offering those services anymore. So your actual payments may be impacted if you're not achieving those deliverables. So what can you use the funds for? This is also a great question we get. So what, if you apply for the grant and are awarded, what can you use the funding for? So the Child Care Desert Grant is basically to get child care programs up and running in those parts of the state that have a shortage of care. So the funding may be used for program development and short-term operating expenses, including but not limited to, and then there's a nice long list there, personnel costs So any costs associated with personnel, including payroll, salaries, benefits, et cetera. Other childcare business expenses, supporting staff to access their COVID-19 vaccine, very important to get vaccinated. Rent or mortgage in accordance with any cost allocation methodology, and any utilities that come with that. And then also there's a lot of training and technical assistance, as well as professional development, business training, and business services. So the funding can be used for any and all of those categories to operate the business or operate the program. This is not a reimbursement-based grant, so the provider does not need to outlay the funding. They do need to document every single expense and what they're using the funding for, and it can only be allowable expenses. And we, OCFS, will work with all of the awardees to ensure that they are using their funds for allowable expenses and are documenting it accordingly and have what they need to document. And we have a great network of child care resource and referral agencies who are going to be available to assist if providers don't know how to do that, or what are some examples, or what in the world is a cost allocation methodology. So know that there are supports out there. These are other examples of allowable expenses. Like I said, payroll, rent, mortgage, utilities. I want to spend a minute on facility maintenance and improvements. These do have stricter rules because it cannot be used for construction or major renovation, an extension to a facility to increase floor area, or major altercation of the facility. These funds are federal funding, and therefore come with these restrictions, and the feds are very strict. So this is not a capital grant. You cannot purchase a facility. You cannot renovate, major renovations to a facility. We understand that providers do have capital needs when they are starting a child care program, and your child care resource and referral agency, or even your small business development council also can help with accessing capital funds. But this grant, the Child Care Desert Grant, cannot be used for major renovations, purchasing a building, et cetera. Other examples of allowable expenses, goods, services, trainers, tax and bookkeeping services. There are fees that come with training and staff recruitment, so you can use it for those. Equipment and supplies, if you need to purchase technology for reporting, and obviously toys and all of the good stuff for working with the kids. So how will the grant be scored? So new programs will be scored on their location and their compliance with all of the eligibility requirements, as well as other details. Now, what does that mean? So there's 4 buckets or 4 pieces that go into a score for this grant. And I'm going to go into it a little bit deeper, but again, if you are planning on applying for this grant, all of this information will be built into the application portal. So you do not need to do all of these calculations. It'll be built in, and so the information you'll be providing is where you're looking to set up your program and what type of program are you looking to set up and how many kids are you going to serve. That's the information we need from you. But I'll explain the scoring here so that you understand what goes in behind the scenes. So the first thing that programs will be scored on is where they are located. So if you're located in a child care desert census tract, that's your address, basically. The second thing is if you're located in an REDC, or if you're located in a region that has a high percentage of desert census tracts. So if you remember that chart or table that was earlier on in the presentation with the highlighted yellow that showed that some regions have more child care deserts than others. So There's a high, medium, low for each region, but each region gets a score. And so you'll be scored not just on where your program is located, but what the region you're located in. Number 3 is areas with a high diversity index. So we want to incentivize providers and reward providers in setting up programs in areas with high racial and ethnic diversity. So diversity index is a national metric of looking at the entire country and how what the racial and ethnic makeup is in a particular geographic area. So in order to incentivize programs in those areas, we want to look at a high, medium, low score for a diversity index. And then also we want to incentivize programs serving areas with a high percentage of children at or below 200% of the federal poverty level, or FPL here. Again, we know we have deserts all across the state, but in specific areas that have a high poverty level, we know there is a significant shortage of care. So we want to incentivize providers setting up in those areas. So, like I mentioned before, there's bonus points, and for bonus populations, infant toddler, which is the I/T, it's not information technology, it's infant toddler, and also non-traditional hours. So if you enter your program information, the geographic area of your program, and you'll be able to note whether or not you're serving or intend to serve infant toddlers or offer non-traditional hours. So this is a breakdown of the scoring. Again, this will all be in the background, so you don't need to memorize any of this or try and calculate your area. But the first one is what level of where your program is located, what the level of census tract is. So that's high, medium, low, or not a desert. So I just want to flag that piece because we know that if you're opening, say, a home-based program, you can't choose where your program is located. But if your specific census tract is not a desert, but your region is a high child care desert, you can still have a very competitive score, because we know also that families don't choose their child care based on census tracts, right? They choose it based on a variety of factors. So when you look at the totality, I'm going to show the map shortly, just know that each region is scored a little bit differently based on the numbers here. So the A2 is the program located in a region with a high rate of census tracts, high, medium, low? Is it in an area of high diversity per the diversity index? And is it in an area with a high rate of children living at or below 200% of the federal poverty level? The bonus points are the last two on the bottom here. So does the program intend to serve infant toddlers? Yes, no. This particular bonus does not apply to school-age programs because they don't serve infant toddlers. So that's why it says SACC, which is school-age childcare, NA, not applicable. And if you're planning on providing non-traditional hours, that's the 5 additional points. So for school-age childcare, the maximum score is 105, and for everybody else, the maximum score is 110. So what do you have to do if you get this grant? What is this grant for? What do I have to do? So there are 4 main deliverables and then the 2 bonuses, but there are 4 main deliverables that you need to do should you receive this grant. It is a deliverable-based grant, which means you need to meet these deliverables in order to get paid, but it is not a reimbursement-based grant. So you are required to use the funding to operate your program and spend the money on those eligible expenses and track your expenses and keep all of that stuff on record for 6 years. And those will continue to keep your payments moving forward. There will be quarterly inspections or quarterly site visits by your regulator to keep you on track, make sure that the deliverables are being met. And we will be looking at our other systems of record, so OCFS system or New York City system, to confirm. a lot of this information. So the first deliverable is that you are open and operating. Does that make sense? First deliverable is that you have to be a child care program and open and operating. It is not required to have 100% enrollment. We know that programs will not be at 100% enrollment on their first day. The requirement is that you are open, operating, and staffed accordingly if you are receiving this grant. So programs will get licensed, they will open, which is great, and if they are receiving this grant, they are expected to be staffed based on their receipt of this grant expectations. What does that mean? It means if you are receiving the infant toddler bonus, you need to have staffing to reflect as if the infant toddler room was full, right? You can't just wait until your enrollment is up. You have to be staffed appropriately. So we'll be looking at all the documentation there, and programs need to stay in active status unless there's temporary closures due to COVID or short-term vacation days. But the staffing ratio needs to be in existence even if the enrollment we're working towards full enrollment. We do expect programs to maximize their enrollment as quickly as possible. We want to make sure the program is successful, and we expect that they'll work throughout the first year to be at full enrollment. And honestly, with all the parents looking for care, I don't think that will be a struggle, but staffing will be the struggle line. Deliverable 2 is the program in good standing? So you have to be deliverable 1 is that you're open and operating. Deliverable 2 is that you are not in enforcement status. Open in good standing is a limited definition of programs going into enforcement status. So if there are issues with enforcement in these specific categories, that could inhibit, that could allow for a partial payment in these areas. Deliverable 3 is that the program must be actively engaged in Quality Stars New York or the Start with Stars program. So for those of you not familiar with what Quality Stars is, it's a fantastic quality improvement program for child care providers in New York State. Programs will be participating on a rolling basis. So the first step is that you apply to the program. So the metric is that you must apply and be actively engaged, but you'll be admitted on a rolling basis. So it's a fantastic program. You get a quality improvement specialist assigned to you. They come in and work with you on your program and what other resources you might need. They work with your staff on education credentials that they're working towards. They support definitely the Start with Stars program is fantastic for new programs getting off the ground and learning about how to really build a quality program. So it's a great opportunity for all providers. But we do know it's in the process of expanding right now, so you'll be, providers will be rolled onto the program. So at this point in time, school-age child care programs are not eligible to apply for Quality Stars, but when that option becomes available, they must apply. Deliverable 4 is that staff are completing their training in compliance with OCFS regulations and/or Article 47 New York City requirements. Now, all programs must meet all regulatory requirements, of course, but often we see that training, there's a lot of training that needs to happen for all staff. So we want to make sure that all providers are making progress on all trainings, and OCFS and New York City are committed to helping all providers make sure that those are being completed on a timely basis. So deliverables 5 and 6 are part of the bonuses. So these are for the 2 bonuses. Deliverable 5, if you're offering non-traditional hours, you need to be open and staffed during non-traditional hours to receive that bonus. Deliverable 6 for infant toddler slots, again, need to be staffed accordingly and have the qualifications accordingly for infant toddler capacity. So I want to spend a few minutes, I know we're running out of time here, but I want to talk about the child care deserts map. So where are the child care deserts in New York State? So this is a completely voluntary tool. You do not need to use this tool to apply for the grant. This is a reference tool to see how you would do in your area on this grant opportunity. So I know there's some confusion about how to use it and pull it together, but you don't need to use it if you don't want to. It's just a helpful reference tool. So our colleagues at the Council on Children and Families partnered with us to develop, and our data team to develop this map to show where the child care deserts are and how they would score, what an estimated score might be for that area. So the parts of the state with the darker brown are more child care deserts, and the lighter brown are less child care deserts. But I want to click it and show you how to use it, just very quickly. These work. All right. Okay. So, like I said, the map represents every part of the state, and it's split by region. You can zoom in. If you want to zoom in, I just kind of scrolled with my mouse there. On any part of the state, I'm just sticking with the capital region because that's where I physically am located, but I will dance around and show you downstate in a moment. So this is the city of Albany, and you'll notice parts of Albany are much lighter than other parts of Albany. So there are census tracts that are scoring 100. So say I was located in this part of Albany County, and my region, there's something funky going on with the map. I don't know if you noticed that. Cassie.
Oh, very strange. I'll put a report in on that. I have never seen that before.
Me neither. Something's going on, friends. Sorry, all 200 of you. So each of the four, there's supposed to be those 4 scoring points that I talked to you about earlier on the map, but we're missing the first one. So that's a problem. And we will fix the map. But what I want you to do, and just kind of highlight over here, is that you can type in your address. If you're a home-based provider, you can type in your address. So 123 Delaware Ave. So you can type in your address, and it'll zoom in real quick on how your address looks in terms of a score. Or if you are a center-based provider or a school-age provider and you're not sure quite where to locate your program, and you think maybe it's a toss-up between here, here, or here, you can kind of dance around and click around the map and look accordingly. I'm going to quickly scroll downstate so folks in our downstate region can see it clearly gets crowded, but don't worry, you can zoom in hyper-local. Okay. And you can add in our boroughs here, and I'm going to take out all this busyness. Okay. So if you'll notice, you can look for New York City, you can add in the boroughs and add in, you can zoom in really hyper-local. I know that some of you would prefer like the street names or the zip codes. We don't have those layers on here, but you can, again, type in your address or type in some zip codes into the address box up here, and then see where you are in that region. But, plenty of the Bronx and Brooklyn are child care deserts as well as Queens. For our colleagues on Long Island, where I know there's lots of villages, which gets really tricky to figure out where the child care deserts are. You can add different layers that add in the different village levels. So say you're in Hicksville and you're able to click around, you'll notice parts of Hicksville score much higher than other parts. So again, it's a useful tool. We're going to get it fixed today, don't worry. But want to flag that as a tool. There are also instructions online, and They are in English, Spanish, so you can click here or you can go to the OCFS website and do that. And if you'll notice, right in here, this is what the scoring should look like. It should say how your census tract is, what your region looks like, what the diversity index is, and what the percentage of families at or below 200% of poverty. So it will give you your estimated score. It is an estimated score, and again, this is just a tool to help you see what the possible information for the grant application is. You can either search by address or zoom in. You can click on a census tract to see how that possible score might look, but all scores and all the information is going to be pre-populated in the grant application. So you don't need to use it if it's not helpful, but if it is helpful, please feel free. Give us 10 minutes to get it fixed, but then you can feel free. So what do you need to know? The really important thing that
hey, Nora.
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Just if you're displaying your slides, we can't see them.
Oh no. How is that possible? Oh, no.
Once you switched back from the map.
What happened?
Do you want me to share? Oh, there you go.
There we go. But now I need to go all the way to the end. Please hold. Let me go here. I was just getting to the what do you need to know. It's the good stuff.
Very interesting stuff. And you're also, it's not displaying anymore. It popped up for a minute and now it's not showing again.
There we go.
Okay, we're good now. We are good.
Great. Okay, what do you need to know? Quickly before our time runs out. You should begin planning all that you need to do to open a child care program now. So begin investigating. There's an orientation online that's an orientation to opening a child care program. You should take that orientation. You should take the New York City orientation if you're opening a program that is a permanent center in New York City. You should also investigate local zoning laws or other applicable laws. And then you should also, if you're interested, it's not required, but if you're interested, our local child care resource and referral agencies are offering sessions on how to open a program. So these are not about this grant. They're specific to how to open a child care program, but they talk about different modalities. So if you're a home-based provider or school age or others. So if you're interested and have questions, our child care resource and referral agencies are great resources for that. The next steps, of course, are reviewing the RFA and reviewing those orientation sessions like we talked about. You need to determine what type of business or what type of program you want to be. And the reason I say that is because when you apply for the grant, you'll need to enter in your tax ID. So if you're going to be a for-profit business, if you're going to be a sole proprietor all by yourself, if you are going to be a nonprofit, that takes time to incorporate. So you'll need to determine pretty soon what type of business or what type of program you're going to be, because when the application opens in April, you'll need to enter your tax ID, and that's for several reasons. The most important is that that's the way we would pay you, so that's an important reason. You can attend those sessions if you're interested, and then the grant submission will start on April 11th. So if you are granted pre-approval, so once the grant portal opens on April 11, it'll close on May 19, I believe, and awards will be announced in June. If you are granted pre-approval for this grant, you have to complete the licensing process within 120 days. And it does take time because there's background checks and training, and you know, if you haven't decided what type of program or how many kids or all of that stuff. So it's really important that you get started ironing out those things, doing a business plan, looking at your local zoning, taking that orientation video, talking to your child care resource and referral agency. It's really important to get started. So the website here, it has resources on it, but also your local resource and referral is a great opportunity too. We did also post online these regional priority documents. So if you're curious about the different types of care currently available in your region, each region has done one of these documents that looks at what the demographics are, what the shortages are, what type of care. In this example, excuse me, it's Southern Tier. So Southern Tier, as you saw, was over 70%. And what parts of the Southern Tier? So it looks at Tompkins, looking at Broome, and what types of care are available within those different counties. So if you're curious and want to look at your region, these are good resources. I'm going to stop sharing. We are just about out of time. Like we said, thank you for submitting your questions into the chat box. This presentation, exact same presentation with an hour-long recording of my voice already, is available on the OCFS website, so the PowerPoint as well as the
the transcript is up there as well.
Thank you.
The recording.
I was going to say script, but I was blanking on my blank.
And it's up there in English and Spanish.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, Kathy. So please, you can submit your questions into the question and answer box. There's also an email address in the RFA document or in the request for application. So send your questions into that email box, and then also come back to the website and shortly and review the question and answers that are posted. We're going to be posting those on a rolling basis, so make sure to keep checking, and then take that orientation video and take what you need to get started opening your program. Thank you all so much for being here. So excited to have such interest. Very excited, and we expect to hear from you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.